Brian Kelly, it is so great to have you back. Congrats on the book.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a labor of love, but I'm excited for it to get out there.
When we first launched the podcast, you were one of the first guests, so I appreciate you coming back now. You have spent the last couple years here writing this book, How to Win at Travel. A lot of practical advice here. This is chock full. Finding the cheapest flights, leveraging airline, hotel, credit card loyalty programs. You even have a little bit on conquering a fear of flying, if you have a fear of flying, beating jet lag. I feel like this is we got a sense of your brain. You downloaded decades of experience in your brain into this book.
I joke that I wrote the book only so I could enjoy dinner parties again, because every time I'm at a dinner party, people like flock to me, and I'm just like, spitting out, how do I buy cheap flights?
Yeah.
What's the best cure for jet lag? So now I just want to be like, you can read my book.
You
Let's
literally could just say page 162.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about sports now. Yeah, or something.
I want to say the book jacket, impressive. I go to the back, there's always like on the back of a book, you're like, oh, I wonder who endorsed this book. And you're like, I'm going to drop Martha Stewart, Whoopi Goldberg, Kelly Ripa, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times.
My motto's always been go big or go home. So,
I love the quote from Bloomberg on the back of your book. Brian Kelly changed how we travel. There is no other way to put it. Mic drop before you even open this.
I'm blushing.
But most importantly, in this time, you've also now become the father of two. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my firstborn Dean is just over 2 years, and he's been to 16 countries. So I've certainly earned my stripes. I think
16 countries in 2 years.
And he went on a Newark to Johannesburg, one of the longest flights in the world. So I've got lots and lots of tips for traveling parents, because I thought I was an expert, but when you have a kid, the game changes completely. You've got, do they sit on your lap? Do they sit in a car seat? Many airlines don't even allow car seats. It was amazing to me. Every airline has different ticketing policies. How much are they going to charge you for the lap infant? When I wrote that chapter, I feel really good about the family travel chapter, starting from like before your kid is born. Talking to board certified OBGYNs. I really think it'll be a good resource, because my main tip for people is traveling with kids can be stressful, but it is incredible. I think it's good for kids to start traveling at a young age, and they deserve to. There's a whole,
And you also realize the different phases. I mean, we have taken, Olivia hasn't left the country yet, but she's been on probably 9 or 10 flights in 16 months. And you realize you're like, okay, like I really loved traveling with her when she was 4 months old, but then things, the game changers when they start walking, and every kid is different. And you do realize that the airlines themselves, the number of times I brought a Duna aboard where they're like, well, you need to I was like, no, that fits in your seat.
Yep. So much of the airline travel industry, you need to know your rights, and you need to know when you're asking for a favor, like it, and knowing the difference of both and standing your ground when you actually have the right to is like, and I think most consumers just get like frozen on planes. And I think the point of this book is to tell you, when to stand your ground, or if you're asking to be put on a different flight when it's not owed to you, don't scream at the agent, right? Like there's times to use different intonations.
Yes, be nice, I think is one of your
generally.
Despite the fact that traveling can be frustrating, right? Things happen, but being nice will go a long way. So I want to transition here from talking about your kids. We'll get back to advice for parents here in a second, to when you were a kid, Brian, because that's sort of the origin story of the Points Guy. For those of you who have seen your TV appearances, followed you on social media, this all started for you in middle school.
Yeah, I was 12 years old. My dad, one of my first jobs was booking him travel. He had gotten a job at a startup. He was not very computer savvy. Meanwhile, I'm 41 now. So I grew up in the 90s when AOL, Prodigy, I was like a little hacker.
Early internet days.
Early internet days. I mean, dial-up internet. I installed Prodigy. I got a burlap sack with the Prodigy modem. And in 1992 or three.
That's what we needed. They sent you kids a CD in the mail in order to that you needed to effectively put in your computer to download internet.
And and your phone line would dial, it would be busy, and then you'd finally connect. And so yeah, so I was just like a little hacker. My dad traveled. I was booking his flights for him on Travelocity, which had just launched in 1995. And he one day he was like, and I'm one of four kids, and he's like, I have all these airline miles scattered. If you can do anything with them, we'll go on a free trip. And I successfully got us. I didn't want to go to Florida. I was like, that's boring. So we did the Cayman Islands, and I was 12.
As one does as a 12-year-old, you're like, Florida's boring.
And for like 2 weeks, my dad thought I said Grand Canyon. And then he gets like the tickets in the mail, and it's like Owen Roberts International Airport. My dad is like, what the hell? He's like, and I remember him asking, he's like, are there hospitals there? Like my parents were not jet setters. They grew up middle class Long Island families. My dad's dad was a firefighter. So, he traveled for work, but he didn't have this like jet set flair to him. And I somehow, I think, was born with it genetically. I've just always wanted to like travel. So yeah, 1996 was our first trip on points, and we would do that throughout the 90s. I never thought that there was like a whole nother subculture of people building on the internet doing the same thing. It wasn't until like 2004 that I stumbled upon Flyer Talk, which is basically a Reddit for frequent flyer maniacs, and I dove down that rabbit hole deep, and then launched the Points Guy in 2010. So it's been a long evolution. This was not something I just did to like create a business one day.
Right. Even Points Guy was a side hustle that becomes a full hustle for you.
Yeah, it wasn't even a blog at first. I was a points travel agent. So I was charging people $50 to use this skill of booking points, which I enjoy. To me, it's like doing a crossword puzzle. Like when I can get all the points to align and then deliver an amazing trip to someone who didn't think their points were worth anything, like that to me is satisfying. But my dad said to me, he's like, you need to create a business that's going to make money in your sleep. Like you can't just keep doing these one-on-one ticket bookings or even teaching other people. He's like, it's going to be difficult to have a call center. So,
Well, now the Wall Street Journal refers to you as the credit card kingmaker. You refer to the empire. You now have this book jam-packed, about 300 pages here, just a guide, but you were telling me beforehand that this could have been 600 pages.
Yeah, and I really was kicking myself because I did the audiobook, and it was right before my son was born. I the way the scheduling worked, I had to do it all in a week basically, and it was 40 hours in the studio, and some of the language is somewhat technical, so it was a lot. I was like, why did I write such technical information? But I do hope that it comes across. The book is for beginners. There's even if you're a frequent flyer, I firmly believe you'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
But I wanted this book to be for someone in their 20s who's like, I want to be a traveler, but I don't know how, right? Like even from starting, like what is appropriate to spend on travel a year?
Yeah.
We live in this social media age of everyone's just flying everywhere. I mean, how often do you see people, you're like, how is that person affording to travel?
Well, that's social media these days. You like look on Instagram and you're like, everyone I know is in Italy and I've looked at prices lately. How are they affording these trips?
So I wanted this book this will take anyone, I think, at least to an intermediate level. There are some more advanced topics.
Yes.
And I think the book, it's 15 different chapters, but you could go back as a resource. There's a whole chapter on what happens when travel goes wrong. If your hotel is oversold, if your airline cancels, what do you owed? So I feel like there is a lot there, but it'll be a resource for people to kind of go back and reference.
So let's do Cliff's Notes here for 300 pages. I mean, the title here is How to Win at Travel. How does one win at travel in terms of kind of your basic headlines?
Well, the first thing is before you even book travel, knowing the pitfalls. Right now, so many people book. There's a lot of online travel agencies that are shady. There's a lot of friction now when you book through third parties. If something goes wrong and you book through a weird OTA, a lot of times the airline will say you have to call that travel agency to fix it.
Well, I even experienced that recently. I think I booked a hotel. I forget, it was maybe through Chase Sapphire or Amex, and I was trying to change like my stay, and just the number of phone calls I had to make because the hotel is like, not us.
Yeah, sometimes if you use a really good travel advisor or luxury travel agency, that can actually be a value add. But in most part, you're just a number. And I talk about it in the book. I interviewed behind the scenes a lot of people in the industry for this book, like front desk managers. And they're like, no, most of the OTA reservations, they're the first to get walked, meaning if the hotel oversells, they'll just not honor it or get the worst room. So And what people don't realize, even for luxury hotels, never book on the hotel's website directly. Book through a luxury travel advisor. They have relationships with the hotels. It's the same price, and you get tons of extra perks, late checkouts, etc.
Oh, so don't book it like Marriott.com or
So
Hilton.com.
for super high for luxury hotels, never book directly because by booking through Amex Fine Hotels and Resorts or a Virtuoso travel advisor, you're going to get extra perks than what the luxury travel the
So
luxury
you're talking
hotel.
like Ritz-Carlton, Four
Yeah,
Seasons type.
but for regular hotels, book at Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, etc. Um, because if you book through an online travel agency or even the Amex Travel or Chase Travel for basic hotels, you're treated as an OTA, online travel agency customer. So it gets a little bit confusing, but bottom line, generally booking directly with hotels is better than going through the OTAs. The OTAs, in my opinion, add a lot of friction, and unless they're saving you tons and tons and tons of money, which they're not most of the time, um, then avoid them, frankly.
So you mentioned budget. How, like what I know you go through this in the book, but what are your budget tips for figuring out how much you can afford to spend on travel annually?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you want to take 20% of your disposable income for the things you like to do in life. And of that budget, you kind of have to put aside, how much of that should be
Wait, so
travel.
sorry. So your overall, so you take what you make in a year.
Yep. Your take home salary,
Mm-hmm.
50% of that goes to your needs, your rent, all the bills that you have to pay to function. Um, and 30% of that should be put towards the things you like to do. The 20% is the future you, kind of saving for your future. So let me just take that.
50% needs, 20% future you,
And the
30%.
30% wants,
Yeah.
likes in life. So take 30% of your take home and say, what are the things that bring me joy, whether it's fashion, travel, handbags, whatever, but stay within that budget. And my point of the book is by leveraging loyalty points, you can take that budget, even if you're not making a lot of money, you can double or triple your travel budget just by being smart about getting, one or two new credit card sign up bonuses a year that could easily be $1,000 each. Plus, leveraging every single dollar you spend with the right credit card that has the right points multiplier. For if you pay rent, the Bilt credit card gives you 1 point per dollar on rent with no fees. So by having a no annual fee Bilt card, you're earning valuable points on rent, which then you can use towards travel.
Yeah, so Bilt, BILT, this is one of the cards you go through, and you have a whole
Yeah.
chapter. You actually have a whole chart in there of various credit cards and the benefits that you get from each credit cards. I think the last time we spoke, I asked you, I was like, how many credit cards you got? And you told me you had 25 at that time.
Yeah, I think I'm at 28 now. I splurged a little bit. I mean, I don't recommend the everyday person getting a ton of credit cards, but
A lot, 28.
well, what I go through in the book is your credit score actually goes up. This is what people don't realize. The more credit you have and the less you use, your score is called your debt to credit utilization. And when banks issue you credit and you're very, very responsible and only use a small amount, pay it off in full every month, then your credit score actually goes up. So by having credit cards, and many of the cards that I have perks that pay for the annual fee and more, free nights, companion passes. So by getting several credit cards a year, especially if you're married, have your spouse also get, that's called two-player mode. So both of you are earning points, both of your credits going up. There are small things that people just have these aha moments like, oh, my spouse has always had my extra card. And I'm like, why? Because, you could get many, many years the annual fee worth in just a sign up bonus alone. So couples who play this game together every year, they're each getting a couple different cards that bonus in different areas. And that's when you really supercharge your point strategy. And your credit score goes up as long as you're paying your bills in full every month. I feel passionately about this. Do not get credit cards if you're going to be incentivized to just spend recklessly or pay interest. If you're paying any interest on your balances, you're negating all the value of your points. Full stop.
Yeah, you say so. You have 28 credit cards, which you don't recommend. But I think I actually just saw the headline recently of a guy who achieved a perfect credit score, and he realized that the way to do it was get a whole bunch of credit cards, pay them off, and he was able, I think, 8 out of 12 months. We did this on the podcast recently to actually achieve the perfect credit score. Though he found it wasn't worth that ultimately once you have a high credit score, having a perfect one didn't get him anything more.
Exactly.
So the average American you write in the book has about 4 credit cards. We're unique in this way, sort of the points culture, the benefits culture that we have here versus other countries. I think you said the average German does not have a credit card.
Yeah. Well, it's like less than one. Germans pay cash for everything. Um, and this is really important. So I'm the points guy. Obviously, I love points, but having credit is amazing in so many other ways. Number two is protection. So not only are you earning points, but when you put purchases, and the cost of most goods is the same whether you pay cash or with credit card, um, the credit card company will protect you if something goes wrong. So if you wire money to a villa owner abroad and you show up and it's nothing like you expected, you are essentially screwed unless you sue them in that country. I can't tell people enough. You want to have protection from a major bank in the case. So you're getting a built-in insurance protection for purchase goods and even for travel. So, the airlines are cheap. They're not going to give you, tons of money to stay at a nice hotel if they cancel your flight. You might wait in line for an hour to get a Motel 6 voucher if you beg. But if you use the right credit card to book your flight and your flight's canceled or delayed long, your credit card company will let you get an Uber to a nice hotel and fully expense it. And that's what people don't realize. So you get this whole layer of protections. And then thirdly, you get free float. So think about today, you can let your money, your cash sit in high interest, high yield savings account until you actually have to pay off sometimes 45 days after your purchase. So you're earning points, you're earning protections, and you're even earning interest by letting your cash earn interest until you have to pay off your credit card for 30 to 60 days after your purchase. So by not leveraging credit, and as long as you're paying it off, you're really doing yourself a disservice on multiple levels.
You go into the best credit card, and there's so many of them out there. There's the airline cards, there's hotel cards, there's sort of the all-encompassing cards where you can transfer points. You lay out what you call your 10 commandments of credit cards in the book. Without going into all 10 of your commandments, ultimately, what are the rules of the road when it comes to deciding for your family or individuals what the best credit card is for you?
Yeah, for you, you look at what you spend your money on first and foremost. So look at the major categories. Supermarkets are big, dining is big. There's even credit cards now for fitness. It really just depends. And what I push people to think about too is travel. A lot of credit cards give the Chase Sapphire Reserve is 3 points per dollar on all travel. But that's not just airlines and hotels. That's parking, tolls, public transit. There's a huge category within that. So my goal to everyone is take a look at where you're spending your most money, rent, and then get credit cards that bonus you out for that. Because that's the ongoing, as long as the goal is to get more than 1 point per dollar on everything you spend on. So then getting a credit card like a Capital One Venture, which gives 2 points per dollar on everything. That's the card I use for doctor's purchases or, um, you know, even fashion, going out and shopping in a store. There's nowhere that gives double points, or triple points for clothes, right? So you have a base card that earns 2x, and then you have a blend of other cards that give you 3, 4, 5x in all the major categories you spend in. That's how you really build a strong foundation for constant, replenishment of your points.
Do you have a guide out there for, if I'm like, level setting and I'm like, all right, I have these cards. What should I be using my Visa for? What should I be using my Capital One for? Is there a central repository for deciding which card to be using what for? Or
Yeah.
does it
I mean,
really require just a lot of time on these websites?
it doesn't require a lot of time. I think you could just, once you identify what you're spending your money on, just go, you can Google the best credit card for grocery, for streaming. Small businesses is big. So one of the biggest way I earn points, when I sold the points guy, I put in my contract that I had to put our company spend on my personal credit cards so I could get the points so that I could practice what I
Naturally.
preach.
Yes.
And they were like, sure, we don't care if you use our corporate card, but like fast forward, and we're now spending millions and millions of dollars on Google ads, Facebook advertising. So for anyone who has a company that does internet advertising, there's the Amex Business Gold, Chase Inc. Preferred that give 3 and 4 points per dollar on all of that spend. So I know lots of small business owners who are not millionaires, but they're spending a lot and getting reimbursed on that spend. So yeah, I mean, I would just say in the book, I cover the best credit card category bonuses. That's what you want to, so if you're spending a lot at pharmacies, gas, et cetera, there's different cards. And I think the nuance with points is as you alluded to, there's three main categories of rewards: cash back, which is what it is, you get cash. Then there's the co-brand cards where you get one certain airline mile or hotel currency. I generally those are good for perks like free check bags, free, companion tickets.
Right.
But
We have the Delta Amex.
and I would only really recommend using that for when Delta flights when you want to get the eight free check bags, up to eight check bags. But the real people should be putting a majority of their spend on transferable points cards because these are the credit cards where you accrue into the credit card currency, Amex membership rewards, Chase Ultimate rewards, Capital One miles, and then you can transfer to a number of different partners. Because when you just accrue into one airline, this is a mistake I see a lot of people making. Like, I like Delta, I'm just going to go all in on Delta. But when it comes time to redeem for an award, you're seeing Delta charges 5x what the same exact flight would be on its partner Air France. And you can transfer 50,000 Amex to Air France for business class to Europe, but it's 500,000 on Delta. I get it all the time. Okay, now I want those Delta miles to be Air France. I don't want Delta miles anymore. And I'm like, you can't. You've agreed to bank them in a much less valuable currency. So this is like why I want the book. I want people to think before they commit to these strategies that they don't really understand how they're limiting themselves, to think bigger picture. And the biggest trend in the industry is airline loyalty is sort of being watered down. Everyone's moving to the credit card company programs because you can transfer to so many different partners. If one partner raises the rates on flights, you at least have 20 other partners to transfer to.
Yeah, in preparation for this, I saw the Wall Street Journal headline last week: frequent flyers are done with loyalty programs. Millennials and Gen Z are free agents. More frequent flyers are declaring themselves airline free agents, fed up with the ever-changing requirements to earn and maintain status. You write in the book that 2024 was your first year without airline elite status. The points guy without airline elite status, and you say you don't miss it. Explain.
Well, I still have status, because I still fly enough and I get it from some credit cards, but
Okay.
it was like I didn't seek out status. I wasn't flying
You weren't
United.
going like Diamond or
No, and it was really nice because United is fine domestically, but like internationally, I mean, it's my job too to fly all sorts of carriers. So, you really have to jump through hoops, spend more often, or fly at a time that's not ideal just to on the airline of your choice. And for
yeah.
me, it's just not worth it anymore because, when I started the Points Guy in 2010, roughly 80% of domestic first class seats were given out as elite upgrades. Now that number's flipped. Only 20% of first class seats in America are given out as upgrades. And the number of elites has ballooned because everyone can get elite status with credit cards.
So ultimately, elite status ain't getting you what it used to.
If everybody's VIP, nobody's VIP.
Mm.
But I also make the argument for some people, it might make a lot of sense. If you're a road warrior, you fly out of Newark, or you live in Atlanta, you sort of can't help but have Delta status. But my point is, you don't necessarily need to spend thousands of dollars more in the hopes of maybe getting future perks like upgrades. But for top tier flyers, the airlines still do give, upgrades to business class, which could save you thousands. But you have to do the research. And I think for more and more people just saying, hey, look, I'm going to be loyal to my credit card, earn so many points, I'll book the flight in business class I want, versus booking economy and then biting my nails, praying, hoping that it comes through and having a pit in my stomach the whole trip because my upgrade hasn't cleared yet on the flight home. The better way to do it is just have so many points. You book the flight you want whenever you want it.
So ultimately, have the airline card for those extra perks, the free baggage, etc. But if you're just taking a few trips a year and you're not like a hardcore road warrior for your business travel, have one of these Chase Sapphire style cards where you just have a central repository of points that can transfer to any airline.
Yep, and it gives you triple points on every airline, any travel agency, all Uber, and then you can use those points to buy any flight you want or transfer them to top airlines like United, Air France, Emirates, Virgin, etc.
One of your tips, I think we discussed this last time, but I think it's so important to acknowledge: cheap can be expensive. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so many consumers. So the airlines, you have to understand the industry. So most industries expand by growing. Hotel chains are making more money by adding more hotels across the country. Well, the airlines can't grow for a number of reasons, at least that much because the supply chain of aircraft is totally messed up. Boeing is many years behind their new aircraft. Airbus is delayed, and air traffic, our infrastructure is clogged. Air traffic control systems way outdated, needs a multi-billion-dollar update that never really happened. So our travel system is like at capacity, and more people are traveling. So how do airlines make more money? Because remember, Wall Street demands 20% growth year over year. So what they're doing is brilliant. They're just charging for everything that used to be free. Check bags, that was, now it's carry-on bags. Now it's even in economy, not the premium economy seats you have to pay to just to get in a seat assignment. They are just doing, and JetBlue has dynamic pricing on check bags where you don't even know how much your bag's going to be. It depends on the day when you check in, how many other people. Like crazy new concepts to just squeeze as much money out of the consumer as possible. So airfare is just one small piece because the airlines are brilliant. They know if they offer a cheap fare, but then they're going to crush you with fees across the board. You can spend way more in fees than the airfare alone. So for that's a big mistake people make when booking travel is just assuming, oh, I'm going to fly Spirit for $39 to Miami, when flying Delta would have been 109, but included the carry-on and changes, etc. So that's, and plus Delta's more on time. So if you value your time, there should be something to that as well. Or I'm going to buy the cheapest flight, but I'll have a 60-minute layover in Hartsfield. Well, you're setting yourself up for disaster because you're not making that, because you're going to be delayed out of LaGuardia.
Yeah, you have a 2-hour minimum layover rule.
At least domestically, at least 2 hours. I really think 3 hours these days, especially
Really?
if you're flying in
Save 3
summer.
hours, huh?
If I really, especially internationally too, if you're switching terminals, every country's different with how you do immigration. Because these days, if you miss your connection, often flights are sold out the day of. So you're now gambling to save a little bit of money on a connection to miss a full day of your vacation. I just want people to think, is it really worth it that much? It's just still surprising how many people book cruises and fly in the day of, and then are shocked when their flight's delayed and they miss their cruise that they saved up $10,000 to go on. It happens. I hear about it all the time. And when I say, you probably should have just got a $70 hotel the night before at the airport instead of flying first thing, and they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. So I think there's a lot of simple things that expert travelers do that I want to just at least put in people's minds. Flying in the night before, eating the cost of that $100 cheap hotel, but knowing that you're going to go on that dream cruise might make sense to do. So trying to be cheap and just book the cheapest flight that gives you tiny razor thin margin, that's gambling these days.
One other question, and I see various TikTok videos and Instagram videos about this, about hacks on when you should book travel, how far out, day of the week, time of day. Some people saying, use incognito mode or use a VPN to claim you're in a foreign country. What is the state of play? Is there? I feel like there used to be a day of the week or something to book your flights.
There was,
right?
years ago, airlines would have to file their fares on a Monday, and then they could pull them on by Tuesday. So there were like moments where it was cheaper. But now airlines have algorithmic pricing. They change the price of flights constantly. And the whole VPN thing, people are conspiracy theorists in general. I mean, look at our society. People love a conspiracy. The thing is, if you were going to look at flights and you're searching around and then the flight prices goes up, it's probably because someone else bought a ticket as well. Although I will say Delta came out recently, they are testing AI pricing based on personalization. I do think AI will now allow airlines to have better technology to actually charge you more if they know you're richer.
Right. Like, is it a mistake for me to Google a flight beforehand and then go to the website for the airline? Like, do they know that I did that? Okay.
It doesn't, that stuff doesn't really matter. Now, when you buy a ticket does. International airfare, the general rule of thumb is like 3 months prior to departure. 3 to 6 months is like the sweet spot. But within 3 months, international starts generally skyrocketing. And then the last minute international flights are outrageous. Domestic travel 4 to 6 weeks prior is the sweet spot. But
oh, really? Like if I know that I'm going to be traveling in 3 or 4 months somewhere, don't buy the ticket yet?
Yeah, and you can go in and Google flights. It'll tell you if the fare is currently low, medium, or high. That's not always the case. Sometimes it could be six. That's the thing. There's no one set rule. It's all about using technology. Learning how to get the best flights is using Google Flights, and it'll give you the history of that fare over the last 90 days. And you can see, has that fare been going up or has it been steady and dropping a little? And then you can set alerts if it drops below a certain price. But in general, airfare goes up more than it goes down. So if the price is low on Google historically, my take is buy the flight.
Right, I was going to say, like, if it's a competitive route, like it's Memorial Day weekend, and you're not waiting 6 weeks before Memorial Day to book your
No,
family
because the
trip.
flights can sell out, or even if there's seats available, all the good ones are taken. So there's it's just a it's always a risk. You never know. But yeah, for those flights sell out now during holiday weekends. So sometimes it makes sense to pay a little bit of a premium to give yourself the peace of mind.
To if you know you're 4 or 5 months out, like just book it, as
Yep.
opposed to unless you think it's a random route where I'm like, oh, I'm flying, Chicago to Houston. There's a whole bunch of flights every day. Like I can, I can try to bet and hope that I'll save a couple $100 if I wait till
Yeah.
6 weeks out.
And sometimes I talk about in the book too, if the flight drops enough, a lot of airlines will still give you a voucher. You can rebook it at the lower rate. Southwest will let you do it for free. So keep monitoring after you book a flight. If it does drop enough, you can still get a voucher for the difference because a lot of the airlines have gotten rid of change fees post pandemic. So you can cancel and rebook and get a voucher for the difference.
There's been a lot of focus of late with the most recent administration, Pete Buttigieg and the Transportation Department, in trying to hold the airlines accountable, trying to ensure that they're paying you if you're delayed a certain time. What are the rules? What do people need to know about their rights these days when it comes to airline delays and cancellations?
Yeah, you basically have no rights. I mean, no, the Buttigieg or the DOT did a great job at least saying if an airline delays your flight 3 to 4 hours, you can get a full refund. But you're owed no compensation. They're not going to pay you for a missed hotel night. But it at least gives consumers, like during the Delta meltdown, a lot of consumers were like, the airlines were really naughty. They wouldn't give refunds. They would give you a crappy voucher that expired when they should have given you a refund, or they wouldn't announce, that you could get a refund until after the whole thing was over. So families at airports who were like, Delta's melted down. If I book last minute United tickets, will I even get the refund? Most families like, I'm not taking the risk of not getting a refund and then having to pay double for airfare. So that they did come out with new rules, so when you're owed a full refund, no matter what reason the airline cancels or does a major delay to your flight. They did propose at the very last days, compensation similar to Europe. If you're ever flying within Europe or to Europe on a European carrier, they have EU 261 compensation, which will give you 600 euros if your airline delays your flight for certain reasons or cancels. But that is pending. I don't know if the new administration is going to take that up. I could see the Trump administration, they're very populist in some ways, they're very pro business in others, and I'm sure the airlines are lobbying very hard to get that potential compensation rule scuttled. But it's really important these days to book your flights on the right credit card. Back again to credit card perks that will cover you if your luggage goes missing, if your flight's delayed, you need to get a hotel. Um, the credit card companies will even reimburse for a lot more than people realize. So everyone be smart about using the right credit cards that will help if shit hits the fan.
And that's just a quick Google on the credit card in terms of
Yeah, whatever credit. I mean, you should just Google the best credit cards for trip cancellation and delay coverage. Generally, the Capital One Venture X, the Chase Sapphire Reserve. The Chase Sapphire Reserves has really good coverage. Usually, it's either $500 or $1,000 per person in coverage if something goes wrong with your flight, like you have to get that hotel room, or if you just want to get an Uber to your destination if you don't want to take the connecting flight.
And you talk about travel insurance in the book.
Yep.
And of course, as you're booking on most airline websites, there's always that that thing they make you uncheck. Do you want to insure your trip?
No, no,
Explain
no.
never,
Yep.
right? Your
No,
rule is
no,
never
no, no,
say
no.
yes to the airline.
So I was never a big travel insurance person. Now for international trips, for big ticket trips like big cruises, you booked your family cruise. But Aunt Betty has been battling a disease and it could really throw the trip off. Absolutely get insurance because it's like 5% or even less sometimes total cost of the trip, and it'll cover you for so much. If you get a new job, jury duty, natural disaster hits. What people don't realize, and this is getting back to people don't understand how the travel system works. I get messages every day, people, I got sick, and can you believe American Airlines won't give me a full refund? I have a doctor's note. I'm sick, like and I'm like, well, do you know how many people create fake doctor's notes? And if anyone just sent that, like, anyone could get a refund, and then everyone would just buy the cheapest fare and send in a fake doctor's note. Like, when you agree to buy the cheapest non-refundable hotel, cruise, etc., like you're agreeing to, certain set of rules. If you can't go, they don't care. Might show pity, but in
Is
general,
that
like
where
it's
status helps? Do they give you more pity if you have status?
sometimes, yeah, they generally will. But like even if you've got top tier status and you buy non-refundable ticket and you want to cancel it, they're not going to refund you. So that, you might get a voucher, you might have, the voucher a certain portion of, but you really, if a wildfire hits and you're supposed to stay at a small hotel, this happened in Maui. So many people reach out, can you believe this boutique hotel's not refunding me? I'm like, look, it's not their job to insure your risk. Like this small hotel is probably dealing with life or death, just trying to stay alive with no customers,
Well,
coming.
right. The hotel might be destroyed.
So you're now asking a small business owner to, you know, give you and insure you because this disaster happened out of nowhere, right? Like you should have just bought travel insurance, which would have fully covered it and it would have been a small piece of so I just think with weather being as crazy as it is, political uprisings, travel insurance can cover a ton, including if you get a new job or you get pregnant and didn't realize it. But basically, never buy it through the airline or hotel. Crappy coverage at a really high price. There's a site, insuremytrip.com, and it's a marketplace where it'll show you different policies and always double check the fine print because often the most expensive policies are not the best coverage. So just it's very easy to use that site. Whenever I'm buying insurance, and it's shockingly affordable. We buy insurance for everything else in life. So if you're doing this big trip, anything could happen, and you want to have that flexibility and peace of mind of knowing, hey, look, if anything bad happens, I'll get most of this
And
back.
do you do that for every trip? You go to Insure My Trip? I mean, when you're doing a weekend in like South
No,
Florida, or you doing it for
no,
big
no,
trips?
no, because weekends in South Florida, airlines now have gotten rid of change fees, so I'll get a voucher. And most hotels, I only ever book hotels with like 1 day, 3 day cancellations because my life changes so much, and I use points for a lot. What people don't realize, points when you're deciding whether to use points, you have to realize it's don't compare it to the cheapest basic economy fare. You're buying a fully refundable fare. Almost every loyalty program, all the major US airlines now will let you cancel your points reservations fully, no charges, and get all your points back up until departure. And this is what I educate people on. Points are like an insurance policy. Say you've got to get to LA, you've got to get there for a huge meeting. So you're booked on one carrier. I'll use points to book myself on a different carrier 3, 4 hours later as a backup. And if for some reason my flight's delayed, I have that backup option pre-booked. If my flight goes out on time, I just click the cancel and get all my points back free of charge.
Same day, even
Same
though like
day.
check-in is already started.
Yeah, you can cancel it up until 1 second before departure. So like as long as you want to do it, you don't want to wait to the very last second. Oh, but yeah, when the flights are, if my flight even has a whisper of a delay happening, if I think there's weather happening, I'll pre-book myself other options because if I wait until the flight gets canceled, everyone else will book that flight out. So I'm always 2 steps ahead of everyone, and I get the miles and points back for free anyway. So why wouldn't I just protect myself?
And you're probably a guy who doesn't check bags either. You just have your carry-on.
Yeah, that's the big thing. If you're checking bags, you can still book an option later, but you'd have to convince the airline to take your bags off the plane,
which is more challenging with children.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
diapers and whatnot. We're getting to the conversation here about redeeming points and getting real value, and you spend time in the book on that. And that's always a challenge when I'm looking. I'm like, do I pay the whatever amount for this flight, or do I use my points? And they're like, it's this many points. What's the calculation that people need to use when it comes to thinking that you're getting a good deal, or at least getting a fair deal when using your points versus I should just spend the money on this?
Yeah. So, like I just mentioned, when you have to compare apples to apples. So, if you're looking at a coach ticket, I mean, so Simply put, you want to be getting well over 1 cent per point in value. I mean, your goal is to get 2 cents per point more, and this is for airline miles. So if it's $1,000 flight and Delta's charging 100,000 miles, that's 1 cent per point. That's an
Wait, oh, so you
okay.
do a division there, 1,000 divided by 100,000. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you take the cost of the flight divided by the amount of miles. That will give you a calculation. Most of the major airlines, Delta, United, American, are roughly they're doing dynamic pricing now. It's around 1 to 1.3 cents per point in value on average. So if you see $1,000 flight that's only 50,000 points, that's 2 cents per point in value. That's a pretty good redemption these days. There's ways to get even more than that by transferring to like foreign frequent flyer programs like Air France routinely has 50,000-mile business class one ways to Europe, and those are $3,000 flights. That's 6 cents per point in value, and that's why the transfer game really matters. Now, how do you maximize the transfer game? Back in the day, you'd have to do it all manually, checking a million different airline websites, trying to compare them. But now there's a tool called PointMe. So it's point.me, and it's basically Google Flights, but for award tickets. It'll search, if you have Amex points, it'll search all the Amex options that you have for that route and day. And it'll say, and even if there is a Virgin Atlantic flight, don't transfer to Virgin Atlantic, transfer to Flying Blue because they have less fees. Flying Blue is a loyalty program of Air France, which is a partner of Virgin. So this is where it's so confusing because, oh, I want to fly a Delta flight. I would assume I would just transfer to Delta. Well, most of the time, Delta's partner, Air France, will have that flight for far fewer miles. So point.me, it's like $100 a year, but you can actually use it for free if you have an Amex card. So you go to point.me/Amex and you can use the tool for free. It's also embedded in the Built app. When you go to transfer points, it'll tell you the best, most effective way to transfer your points to the best partner. But rule of thumb is you want to be getting over 1.5 cents per point for airline miles.
So again, the cost divided by the number of points that they want, and then making sure that is 0.01 or above. And then
if you're not getting more than 1 cent per point in value, you should just get a cash back card, like a 2% cash back card. Because think if you're going to spend $100,000 on a 2% cash back card, you're getting $2,000 in cold hard cash every year. And if you're spending that and getting roughly 1 Delta mile per dollar, and that's getting you 1 cent per point, that's 1,000 in flights. So I'd rather have 2,000 cold hard cash to do whatever the heck I want with than $1,000 Delta voucher, right?
What do you say, Brian, to all the people? I mean, as you're going through this point.me thing and you're talking about like Virgin versus people are like, this just sounds so complicated. Like it's just so hard to do all of this and ensure that I'm actually getting utility out of these points and credit cards.
Yeah, it's not completely simple, and that's the point. If it was so simple, everyone could do it, it wouldn't be valuable. Back to if everyone's VIP, no one's VIP. This system, you have to take a little bit of self-responsibility, but I lay out, in this book, I will lead you to the water. I will lead you to the very luscious drinking well of highly mineralized, healthy water. And I'm going to tell you which side of go on this side to get the best, but I can't force you because there's no one best way for everyone. You spend your money on different things. You want to travel differently. So I would say, and for the millions of people who read my website, once you get in on this game, you will kick yourself if you haven't been before. That's the number one thing people say. I've never once in my 15 years of blogging have had someone come up to me and say, I got into this points thing and I wish I hadn't. I've never heard that. Because even if you don't want to fly first class or whatever, even if you want cash, who doesn't want to get more cash to put into their retirement, pay off their credit card debt? Simply put, like winning at points is winning at life.
Even ensuring that you're getting the most out of the card that you have. I mean, I'm like, have I dug around enough to make sure that I'm, I could have, they give me $100 credit for this or $50 credit for this, and ensuring that I'm even getting utility out of existing cards that I have.
For sure. People have so much value in front of them. And that's like what I love about points as a currency. Crypto goes up and down, the US dollar, it's totally out of our control. But just by reading this book, I guarantee you will create more value from existing currencies that you have, because people have a lot more value than they realize sitting in front of them. And that is why I love doing what I do. Because when people can, you can't control getting a raise at work or the rising cost of airfare, but you can control paying a little bit more attention to a system that works for many people. So I can't force you to do it, but I don't think there's any easier way to get your feet wet in points than by reading this book, which I think, breaks it down by chapter and in pretty simple terms.
What are some of the biggest myths you hear from people that like so frustrate you every time you hear it from someone and you're like, no, that is not the case? So there are a couple of things that like we all tend to believe and you're like, Brian, you're here to tell us the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the points game is over. It's I can't tell
Yes.
you how often the game is changing, but we are living and back to the platinum era of
Right. People
travel.
blame you for messing up the points game,
I
right?
mean, yeah, I mean, people are mad at me because this, more people are using it, but I beg to differ. I think the points industry has grown because it's profitable. And so when I started the points guy in 2010, people were saying the game's dead. And now people look back at 2010, oh my God, those were the glory days. It's kind of, I've been in this, so I see how this goes. It's such big business now. The airlines are making more money with this points game than they are flying
They're making
planes.
more money off their credit card situation, right?
So by not paying attention to this hugely critical piece of the puzzle, it is a currency that's like even more valuable in certain cases than cash. You're completely missing the point. So I think the game has changed, but in 2025 there are more ways to earn points. Rent, soon to be mortgages, so many bonuses. There are 15 huge banks competing for your business. You can get $1,000 from a single credit card that's $95 a year. I, for the Americans listening, talk to any of your friends in other countries. They'll say, we don't have that here. And so we are living in this platinum age in the US where everyday people who are not making tons of money can be smart about their credit, can get thousands of dollars of value just by leveraging a good credit score. And I think that's pretty amazing.
I want to get at the stats you share literally on page 2 of your book because I think they're super important. Coming from the media world, where back in my previous life in TV, there is hype over every time there's an airline issue, right? Turbulence on this plane, a near miss, or I should say a near crash. I don't know why they call it a near miss because
It was a miss, yeah.
yeah, it was a miss. But the stats are as follows for 2023: 37 million flights, no fatal jet crash, one propeller plane crash. The chances of dying in a plane crash are 1 in 13.7 million versus a car crash. Your chances are 1 in 5,000.
And yet I know so many friends who are like riding in Ubers, no seatbelt on, and then like have panic attacks flying. I don't know if it's just an excuse because they want to have Xanax and some red wine, which I talk about in the book too. Like, people, please stop doing that, because most of the time when you see people like peeing in the aisle or attacking someone, it's when they're on, Ambien and a whole bunch of whiskey.
Yeah,
But yeah,
you get into everything in the book.
I couldn't help myself. I was like, because I'm hopeful that this book, helps. There's a whole chapter on etiquette and just like the simple things that I think are so simple, but simply are not translating. So I'm hoping people get this book as gifts, and like at least people start to think maybe a little differently about clipping toenails on planes. But travel, I love this stat. You need to travel, you need to fly every day for over 100,000 years to statistically have the chance of dying on a plane. I mean, it's so incredibly safe. And it's bizarre because fear of flying has increased. I think, to your point, every minor incident that have been happening forever is now blown up on social media. And also, I think just the anxiety. We're in the anxiety phase of, our culture. All anxiety related ailments are increasing. Whether that's a lot, I think a lot dependent on social media.
And like some of the headlines around Boeing and stuff have not helped the situation.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I understand it, but in general, enjoy flying. It's the safest way to travel for sure.
Where are you headed to this year?
So this year, I have not been able to take much of a paternity due to this book and the way it timed out. So I think I'm taking both of my sons to Thailand for a month on
Wow.
kind of like take a little extra paternity. I also just got invited to go to Antarctica. So National Geographic, and I'm not a huge cruiser, and the Drake Passage has been a kind of, I don't really feel like for 2 days being rocked left to right on a boat, even though I have good sea legs. So now they have a cruise with Lindblad where you can fly from Patagonia, which is on my to-do list, to Antarctica, a 2-hour flight, and then you pick up the cruise ship in Antarctica there. So you just have calm sailing around like all the fjords and stuff. So I think and I can take both of my boys with me on that. So be kind of fun to say I have a 1-year-old who's been to Antarctica.
Amazing. Brian, you'll have to, we'll watch you document it on Instagram, and maybe it'll be the subject of your next book. Are you going to write another one?
Oh yeah, I've got ideas now. It's not going to be as complex as this one. I want to, but
This
I've
was
got
the encyclopedia for
yeah,
all things points in travel, and now you can kind of
have
take a
some fun with
slice.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I want to write one on luxury travel, like how to spend it, like the really cool, innovative ways. Mostly because I just want to do the research.
Brian, look forward to reading that. And good luck with your travel this year. Congrats again, father of two. Actually, father of three, because now you have the book. You've birthed the book.
Thanks so much. Even though it's a big baby, but I'm excited for the world to read it.